The message arrived on a Tuesday. It came through the relay station orbiting Neptune, a metal box the size of a shipping container that the galactic community had gifted to Earth 11 years ago as a courtesy. Nobody had ever used the word courtesy with so much condescension before, but humanity accepted it the way a stray dog accepts a pat on the head. Grateful, suspicious, too hungry to refuse. The message translated itself into 214 languages simultaneously and delivered itself to every government on the planet within 9 seconds. It was 4 paragraphs long. It was polite. It was the most terrifying document in human history. The Velthari Dominion, a galactic empire spanning 3 spiral arms and 46 conquered species, had decided that Earth's solar system sat in a convenient location for a new resource corridor. The message was a galactic displacement order. In simple terms it said, "Leave your planet within 1 orbital cycle, or we will move you ourselves." 1 year. They gave humanity 1 year to abandon the only home it had ever known. The world did what the world always does. It panicked. 3 UN Security Council members got into a fistfight on live television. 16 countries closed their borders within the hour. A billionaire in California announced he was building a private ark ship and sold tickets for $12 million each. He sold 9 tickets before lunch. Religious leaders declared the end times. Stock markets crashed so hard the algorithms broke. Someone in London started a petition. Tejo watched all of it from a briefing room in Seoul. He sat in a folding chair with a tablet propped against a coffee cup, watching the UN delegates shove each other like drunk uncles at a wedding. He was 37 years old, Colonel, Republic of Korea Army. He had the kind of face that looked calm, the way a frozen lake looks calm, still on top, deep in black underneath. There was a photograph in his chest pocket. He never looked at it. He never threw it away. His commanding officer stood behind him. "What do you think?" Tejo turned off the tablet. "They gave us a year. And that is enough." He did not explain what he meant. He rarely did. Within 2 weeks, the United Earth Defense Council came into existence. It was the ugliest baby international politics had ever produced. Underfunded, understaffed, held together by duct tape, and the shared understanding that extinction was a strong motivator. 40 nations contributed personnel. Most contributed their problems too. Tejo was South Korea's answer to the question nobody wanted to ask out loud. Who do you send when you need someone who already thinks in terms of how to fight a war you cannot win? He brought his team. Yuna, 32, Lieutenant Commander, Navy. She ran electronic warfare the way some people played piano, fast, instinctive, and with a look on her face like she was hearing music nobody else could. Dovon, 29, Sergeant First Class, Marines, built like someone had stacked 2 refrigerators on top of each other and taught the result to do push-ups. He called everyone Hyung, regardless of rank, gender, or species, and he handled problems the way he handled everything, with stubbornness and an inappropriate number of explosives. And Soha, Corporal, 24, Communications and Translation. She had grown up bilingual in Busan, and when the first intercepted alien broadcasts started coming through the Neptune relay, she learned 3 extraterrestrial trade languages in 4 months. She said grammar was grammar. She said it like it was obvious. It was not obvious. Soha was also the first one to notice the thing that changed everything. She sat in a windowless room in the UEDC's temporary headquarters, headphones on, running through intercepted Velthari fleet communications. Hours of it. Days. And somewhere around day 6, she pulled off her headphones and stared at the wall for a long time. The Velthari were not using military encryption. Their communications were casual, unguarded, bored. She was listening to soldiers complain about food rations and argue about a game she did not understand the rules of. One of them was planning what to do when he got home. Another was describing the best way to cook a particular root vegetable. They were not preparing for a war. They were preparing for a move. The fleet was mostly cargo haulers, transports, container ships. The military escort was light, a handful of corvettes, standard formation. To the Velthari Dominion, this was not a military operation. This was pest removal, a formality, a chore. Soha reported this up the chain. The information reached Tejo in 3 hours. He read her analysis twice, then he smiled. It was not a worn smile. 12,000 light-years away, aboard the Velthari flagship, a junior tactician named Akar was doing something none of his colleagues had bothered to do. He was reading. Specifically, he was reading Earth's full entry in the Galactic Registry. It was short. Category 9, Developing Civilization. No FTL, no shields, no unified government. One communication relay. Primitive, irrelevant, standard. But at the bottom, buried in a footnote so small it barely registered, was a note from the xenoanthropologist who had filed Earth's initial assessment 11 years ago. Recommend extreme caution. This species has not known a single generation without internal war. They do not fight to conquer. They fight because they cannot stop. Classification may require revision. Okar brought the footnote to Fleet Commander Relvan. Relvan was old and decorated, and had executed 7 successful planetary displacements without losing a single ship. He looked at the footnote the way a man looks at a fly near his drink, mildly annoyed, completely unworried. Every prey species fights its own kind, Relvan said. It means nothing. Okar left. He kept the file open on his personal terminal. 3 days later, Tejo stood in front of the UEDC's first full assembly. 40 nations, 200 officers, a room full of people who had never agreed on a single thing in their lives. He put one image on the screen behind him. The Velthari fleet composition. Cargo heavy, escort light. They did not bring enough guns, he said. The room was silent. They do not know they need them yet. He let the silence hold for 3 seconds. Then he clicked to the next slide. It was blank, except for one line. Estimated time to contact, 11 months. Nobody in that room slept well that night. But nobody left either. 4 months in, and humanity had done what humanity always does when backed into a corner. It got creative. It got desperate. It got mean. The UEDC had consolidated into something that almost resembled a functioning command structure. Almost. 40 nations still argued about everything from supply chains to bathroom assignments. But they argued while working, which was the best anyone could hope for. Tejo had helped write the central doctrine himself. It fit on 1 page. Most military doctrines took hundreds. This one had a single core idea. We cannot match their technology. We will match their assumptions about us, and then we will break every single one. Yuna was the first to deliver. She had spent weeks doing nothing but listening. Sitting in her chair in the signals room, headphones on, eyes half closed, mapping the architecture of the Velthari communication network the way a burglar studies a building before he robs it. She mapped relay frequencies. She mapped data routing. She mapped encryption protocols. And then she sat up straight and laughed out loud in a room full of people who had not laughed in weeks. The Velthari did not have cybersecurity. They had tradition. Their communication network was ancient, standardized across all 46 conquered species, maintained by routine, never updated. Why would they update it? Nobody had ever tried to break it. Every species they conquered surrendered before it came to that. Their system was elegant. It was also a museum piece. Yuna cracked their secondary relay network in 18 hours. She fueled the effort with energy drinks and something that might have been spite. When she finally got through, she leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling with a look on her face, like a cat that had found an open fish market. When Do-hwan asked why, she said, "Because it was too easy to get inside, and I am going to ruin its life." She was not joking. While Yuna was dismantling the Velthari communication network from the inside, Nari was dismantling their physics. Nari was 41, civilian, astrophysicist. She had been dragged out of her university lab mid-lecture by a military liaison who told her the planet needed her. She told the liaison to go to hell. The liaison showed her the displacement order. Nari went quiet for 9 seconds. Then she said, "Fine," but she needed better coffee than whatever the military was serving, and if anyone touched her calculations, she would make their life a very specific kind of miserable. Nobody touched her calculations. Working with teams from 12 nations, she analyzed the technical specifications of Velthari FTL drives, specs that Yuna's team had pulled from the compromised relay network. The Velthari used a harmonic resonance system. Their drives maintained a stable frequency during faster-than-light travel. It was brilliant engineering. It also had a flaw. Disrupt the frequency, even slightly, and the drive did not just fail. It destabilized. The ship would tear itself apart from the inside, not an explosion exactly, more like a building shaking itself to pieces in an earthquake it generated on its own. Nari presented her findings to the UEDC Weapons Committee. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the weight of understanding what she had just designed. She was a physicist. She built models of the universe. Now she was building something that would unmake ships full of living beings. She presented the data. She walked out of the room and stood in the hallway for 5 minutes, staring at a fire extinguisher on the wall, like it held the answers to questions she did not want to ask. Then she went back to work. Do-hwan handled the ground problem. The Velthari were bigger than humans, faster. Their personal armor could shrug off standard rifle rounds, the way a raincoat shrugs off drizzle. In a straight fight, one Velthari soldier was worth 5 humans, maybe more. Do-hwan did not believe in straight fights. He believed in angles. The Velthari were avian reptilian in biology. Their skeletal structure included hollow bones, strong under direct pressure, catastrophically weak under twisting force. Compression they could handle. Torsion destroyed them. Do-hwan demonstrated this by taking a piece of captured Velthari armor plating and twisting it with both hands until it cracked apart like cheap plastic. He looked up at the room full of officers watching him. Grinned. "Everything breaks, Hyung. You just have to find the angle." His training doctrine was ugly and simple. Modified anti-materiel rifles, IED kill zones in urban terrain, close-quarters tactics designed to grab, twist, and break. It was not elegant. It was not honorable. It was the kind of fighting that a species invents when it has been fighting itself for 10,000 years and has gotten very, very good at finding the weak points in anything that bleeds. And then there was Soha. Soha sat in her translation booth and drowned, not in water, in words. She was processing intercepted Velthari communications around the clock. Not just military traffic anymore, but personal messages too. Letters home. A soldier describing the color of the sunset on a world Soha would never see. A pilot asking his daughter about her studies. A young officer writing to his mate about the ceremony they would have when he returned. They were people. Of course she had known this. But knowing it in the abstract and reading a father's letter to his child in the original language were two very different things. She translated everything. She filed every report. She flagged every piece of useful intelligence. And late at night, when the booth was empty and the screens cast blue light on her face, she opened a blank document and wrote letters to her younger brother back in Busan. She told him about the food in the cafeteria. She told him about the weird noise the heating system made. She told him she was fine. She did not tell him about the letters. 12,000 light-years away, Akar was trying one more time. He had spent weeks monitoring Earth's electromagnetic output, television, radio, internet. He had watched documentary footage from every war in human recorded history. He had seen trenches and firebombs and mushroom clouds and cities reduced to gravel. He had seen humans do these things to each other, not to alien enemies, to themselves. He went to Relvan's quarters. He brought data this time. Charts, statistics, visual evidence. "Commander," he said, "this species has been at war with itself continuously for its entire recorded history. They have used nuclear weapons on their own population. They did not stop fighting afterward." Relvan studied the data for exactly 1 minute. "Then they are insane," he said. "Yes," Akar said, "that is my concern." Relvan reassigned him to inventory duty the next morning. The fleet crossed Neptune's orbit on a Thursday. Earth's relay picked up the automated broadcast, standard for all displacement operations. Soha translated it live for the UEDC command room. Her voice was flat and even, the way a surgeon's hands are steady. "Attention, inhabitants of Sol 3. Your compliance period has expired. Displacement will now proceed. Please do not resist. Resistance will be noted in your file." The room held its breath. 40 nations, 200 officers, every screen showing the same thing. A fleet of 340 ships sliding toward their planet with the casual confidence of a boot descending toward an anthill. Tejo stood at the front of the room. He looked at the screen. He looked at the people. "Note this in their file," he said. Relvan's fleet settled into high orbit, like a flock of iron birds finding a branch. 340 ships. Cargo transports at the center. Escort corvettes in a loose screen around them. The flagship sitting above it all, with the quiet authority of a thing that had never been challenged. Standard displacement formation. Textbook. Relvan had done this 46 times. He gave the order for atmospheric suppression. Targeted EMP strikes on military infrastructure, power grids, communication hubs, command centers. Knock out the nervous system and the body stops fighting. Every species responded the same way. Panic, collapse, surrender. It was not even a battle. It was a procedure. The EMP strikes launched. Some of them hit. Most of them did not. 3 floors below the UEDC command center, Yuna sat in her chair, with her hands moving across 4 screens at once, feeding the Velthari targeting sensors a feast of lies. Phantom military bases. Decoy power grids that existed only as numbers in a system she had owned for 3 months. She gave them heat signatures from empty farmland. She gave them electromagnetic profiles from abandoned factories. She gave them a decommissioned IKEA outside of Stockholm that must have looked like a very important strategic installation from orbit. 60% of the Velthari opening salvo hit nothing that mattered. Relvan's tactical display showed green across the board. Mission success. Target neutralized. His actual effect on anything real was close to 0, and he did not know it yet. He would find out in about 4 minutes. 3 modified intercontinental ballistic missiles launched from submarine platforms in the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic. They had been stripped of their nuclear warheads. In their place sat Nari's resonance disruptors, devices the size of oil drums that did not explode, did not burn, and did not destroy anything in any way the Velthari recognized as a weapon. They generated a frequency, just a sound, if sound could travel through vacuum. A vibration tuned precisely to the harmonic signature of Velthari FTL drive cores. The missiles detonated, not at the fleet, but in the space between the ships. And for 1 second, nothing happened. Then 14 ships died. The ones closest to the resonance epicenters lost drive stability in the same instant. The physics was simple and terrible. A stable system pushed past its tolerance. A spinning top touched at exactly the wrong angle. 3 of the 14 tore themselves apart. Not explosions, Implosions. They folded inward like paper crushed in a fist, metal screaming frequencies that registered on sensors across the fleet. The other 11 went dark, tumbling, power dead, crews alive inside, but stranded in dead iron coffins drifting through orbit. 14 ships. Relvon had never lost 14 ships in a single engagement. The Velthari Dominion had not lost 14 ships in a single war in living memory. His bridge went silent. Every officer stared at their displays. The green indicators were turning red, one by one, like lights going out down a long hallway. Relvon asked for confirmation. He got it. He asked again, same answer. He stood very still for a long time. Then he gave an order he had never given in his career. All ships, combat formation. The cargo haulers scrambled, the corvettes pulled tight, the flagship's weapon systems powered up for the first time since departure. This was no longer a displacement. This was something Relvon did not have a word for, because in his language, the word for war with a lesser species did not exist. You did not go to war with insects. But the insects had just killed 14 of his ships. On the ground, it was worse. The Velthari landed forces at 3 beachheads: Southeast Asia, Central Africa, and Northern Europe. Standard planetary suppression doctrine, fast deployment, overwhelming presence, shock and compliance. They got Dowan instead. Jakarta was the first engagement. The Velthari ground troops advanced through the city, in textbook formation. Tight columns, overlapping fields of fire, aerial support from low-orbit gunships. They were bigger, faster, and their armor laughed at small arms fire. They moved through the outer districts like a wave rolling over sand. Then they reached the city center. The buildings had been prepared for months. Not fortified in any way the Velthari recognized. No barricades, no shield generators, no energy weapons. Instead, there were holes in walls, kill zones measured in meters, not kilometers. Every intersection was a trap. Every building was a weapon. The Velthari did not check corners. They had never needed to. No conquered species had ever fought them in close quarters. Why would they? Close quarters meant you were close to something bigger, stronger, and better armed than you. Close quarters was suicide. Humans had been fighting in close quarters since before they had written language. The first Velthari squad entered a narrow street between 2 concrete buildings and walked into a crossfire from 4 directions. Anti-material rifles, weapons designed to punch through vehicle armor, targeted joints and limbs where the Velthari's hollow bones sat close to the surface. Torsion charges. Dowan's invention, ugly little packages of shaped explosive designed to twist rather than shatter, detonated at knee level. The Velthari armor held against the blast. The bones inside did not. Dowan commanded from a collapsed overpass, covered in concrete dust and something that was not his blood, directing fire teams through a radio that kept cutting out. He had not slept in 30 hours. He did not appear to notice. He keyed his radio to Tejo's frequency. The connection crackled. They are big, young, but they do not check corners. The pattern repeated across all 3 beachheads. The Velthari won every engagement where they had open ground and clear lines of sight. They lost every engagement where they did not. Humans pulled them into cities, tunnels, forests, and ruins. Close, tight, personal. The kind of fighting where size became a disadvantage, and the species that had spent 10,000 years killing each other in exactly these conditions held the edge. It was not clean. It was not glorious. Entire city blocks ceased to exist. The cost was counted in bodies and rubble and smoke that did not stop rising. In the UEDC command center, Soha translated it all. She sat at her console and listened to the Velthari distress signals in real time. Wounded calling for extraction. A pilot screaming about a ship that was folding in on itself. Ground soldiers requesting support that was not coming. And one voice, one young voice, on a frequency that should have been encrypted, repeating a phrase Soha could not find in any lexicon she had. She ran it through every database. Nothing. It was not military terminology. It was not technical language. It was something older, something private. It was a prayer. A childhood prayer. The kind a parent teaches a child before sleep. Soha translated everything else. She filed every report. Her hands moved without stopping. She performed her function with mechanical precision for 11 hours straight. That night, she went to the restroom, locked the door, sat on the cold tile floor, and did not move for 40 minutes. Relvan pulled the fleet back beyond the moon. He had lost 23 ships and over 1,000 ground troops. His tactical staff stood around the command table, looking at readouts that none of them could explain using any model they had been trained on. Relvan did something he had never done. He sent a request for reinforcements. The first Velthari displacement commander in recorded history to make that call. Then he sat alone in his quarters and opened his personal terminal. He searched through his files until he found the one Akar had shown him months ago. The xenoanthropologist's warning about a species that had never known peace. He read it again. This time he did not dismiss it. The next morning, Tejo stood before the UEDC and delivered the casualty briefing. The numbers were on the screen behind him. He did not soften them. He did not frame them with hope or encouragement. He read them the way a doctor reads a chart. Factual, clear, and without comfort. They had won the first engagement. The screen behind him said what it cost. This was the easy part, Tejo said. The room waited. Now they know what we are. He paused. And now they are angry. The Dominion sent 1,200 ships. Not cargo haulers this time. Dreadnoughts, carriers, assault frigates with weapon systems designed to crack planets open like eggs. This was no longer a displacement operation. This was punishment. The galactic community was watching. 46 conquered species were watching. If a Category 9 civilization with no FTL capability could bloody the Dominion's nose, the entire Imperial structure would start to wobble. Relvan understood this. The Dominion High Command understood this. Everyone understood this except apparently the humans, who looked at 1,200 warships and started planning. Tejo knew the math. Earth could not win a fleet engagement against 1,200 Velthari warships. Not with resonance disruptors. Not with hacked targeting systems. The technology gap was a canyon, and no amount of cleverness would bridge it in a straight fight. So Tejo refused the straight fight. He called it Operation Falling Star. The plan was insane. Every officer in the room said so. Tejo agreed with them. Then he explained it anyway. Earth would use its entire nuclear arsenal. Not as weapons. The warheads would be stripped out and replaced. Some with Nari's resonance disruptors. Some with Yuna's sensor spoofing packages. Some with conventional EMP charges. Thousands of missiles, launched simultaneously from every continent and every submarine on the planet. The sky would fill with fire. Not to destroy the Velthari fleet, to blind it, deafen it, cripple its ability to see, hear, and coordinate. Turn a technological war into a night fight in the dark, where the species that had spent millennia stabbing each other in the dark held the advantage. They did not have a better idea. Yuna spent 3 weeks preparing her part. She did not sleep in any pattern that could be called healthy. She ate when Dohan put food in front of her, and sometimes not even then. She was building something beautiful and terrible. Not just a hack this time, but a complete infiltration of the Velthari Fleet Coordination AI. The system that told every ship where every other ship was. The system that turned 1,200 individual vessels into a single organism. She was not going to shut it down. She was going to make it lie. The missiles launched on a Wednesday morning. Every silo, every submarine, every mobile launcher on every continent. The sky filled with contrails so thick They blocked the sun, in some places. Thousands of warheads arcing upward through the atmosphere, not carrying nuclear fire, but something the Velthari had no defense against, because they had never imagined needing one. The resonance disruptors hit first. Ships on the fleet's edges began to shudder and go dark. Then the EMP packages detonated in rolling waves, washing across the formation like static across a television screen. Then Yuna's sensor spoofers activated, flooding Velthari instruments with ghost contacts, false readings, and phantom threats in every direction. And in that chaos, Yuna pressed one key and fed the fleet coordination AI a new truth. Ships began receiving orders that contradicted each other. Formation data corrupted. Navigation systems told vessels to move in directions that put them on collision courses. 3 dreadnoughts, each one larger than a city block, executed conflicting evasion maneuvers at the same time, and met each other at a combined velocity that turned all 3 into an expanding cloud of metal and silence. Yuna watched it on her screen. She was not smiling. Her hands had stopped shaking sometime during the second week of preparation, and the absence of the shaking disturbed her more than the shaking ever had. She had become steady. She did not want to think about what that meant. High above the southern hemisphere, a Velthari carrier lost its FTL core stability directly above Sao Paulo. The energy release was not an explosion in the traditional sense. It was a rupture, a wound in physics itself, a drive core vomiting energy in every direction at once. The burst lasted less than 2 seconds. It killed 40,000 people on the ground below. Nari was in the command center when the report came through. She heard the number. 40,000. She had designed the weapon. The resonance frequency was her calculation. The targeting parameters were her recommendation. The math that tore that carrier apart was written in her handwriting. She walked to her workstation, sat down, opened a new file, and began calculating how to reduce the destabilization yield. How to cripple a ship's drive without turning it into a bomb over a populated area. She worked for 31 hours. Nobody asked if she was okay. The answer was standing in the room like a third person nobody wanted to look at. On the ground, the Velthari adapted. They had learned from the first engagement. They stopped walking into cities blindly. They used orbital strikes to flatten urban terrain before advancing. They brought heavier armor. They started checking corners. Dowon adapted faster. The Korean peninsula became the war's central ground theater, a strip of land that had been divided, fortified, and fought over for so long that the earth itself seemed to understand the concept of a defensive line. Dowon held the eastern corridor with 400 Marines, and whatever he could steal, borrow, or improvise. The Velthari pushed hard for 3 days. Dowon gave ground when he had to, and took it back when he could. On the second day, the Velthari sent an armored column through a mountain pass that had once been a mining tunnel. Dowon collapsed the tunnel on top of them, using charges his team had taken from a quarry 6 kilometers away. 200 tons of rock buried the column in 8 seconds. When Taeho's staff requested a status report, Dowon sent one word: holding. It was during the 3rd day that Akar made his move. He had been reassigned, silenced, and suspected of disloyalty for months. The Dominion's internal security apparatus had him flagged. His access to sensitive systems was revoked. He was, in every meaningful way, a prisoner aboard his own fleet. But he knew the communication network. He had studied it long before Yuna had compromised it. And he knew exactly which back channels she had built, because he had watched her build them from the other side. He made contact with Yuna's signal team on a frequency that nobody was monitoring, because it technically should not have existed. His message was not encoded. It was plain text. 5 words. I can help you win. Yuna did not trust him. She did not need to. She needed information, and Okar had it. Not military secrets. He offered none. What he offered was context. The Dominion's political structure, its fracture lines, the 46 species watching and waiting, the supply chains that depended on conquered labor, the cracks that ran through an empire built on the assumption that obedience was permanent. "You cannot defeat the fleet," Okar told her through the back channel. "You need to survive long enough for the Dominion to realize this war costs more than your planet is worth." Yuna asked why he was helping. The channel was quiet for a long time. "Because I read your history," Okar said, "and I read ours, and they are the same story. We just forgot." Soha intercepted the communication that broke her. It was not a military order. It was a ground commander's directive. Routine, bureaucratic, filed through standard channels. It authorized the destruction of a civilian shelter in Busan, her city. The city where her brother lived in a small apartment near the harbor, and went to school, and sent her messages she could no longer receive because the communication infrastructure was rubble. She translated the order, she filed the report, she routed the intelligence to the defense forces in the area. She did her job with the precision of a machine that had forgotten it was human. Then she picked up her headset and threw it through a monitor. The screen cracked and went dark. Glass scattered across the console. Nobody in the room moved. Nobody said anything. There was nothing to say to a woman holding the shattered end of a cable in her fist, standing in the blue light of the remaining screens, breathing like she had just run a marathon. Taeho found her outside 20 minutes later. She was sitting against a concrete wall in a corridor that smelled like recycled air and floor cleaner. He sat down next to her, did not speak. 10 minutes passed. "My brother is in that city," Soha said. "I know," Taeho said. "I cannot stop translating. I know." She went back inside. The war was 6 weeks old. Earth was burned and bleeding, and still standing. Relvan sat alone in his quarters, reviewing casualty projections that made no sense by any historical model. The Dominion had lost more ships in 6 weeks than in the last 200 years. He opened a channel to the Dominion High Command. His message was brief, requesting revised engagement parameters. Current projections indicate total planetary subjugation will require commitment of the full Dominion fleet. Estimated campaign duration, unknown. This species does not surrender. Advise. The response took 4 hours. It was one word: continue. Relvan closed the channel. He sat in the dark for a long time. The Empire was bleeding from the inside and did not know it yet. Okar's intelligence was right. Across 3 spiral arms, in shipyards and factories and supply depots run by the 46 species the Dominion had conquered, things were going wrong. Small things. A navigation computer filed an incorrect course. A shipment of reactor coolant arrived 3 weeks late. A repair crew replaced the wrong component and shrugged when asked about it. Cargo manifests developed errors that nobody could trace. Supply convoys took wrong turns and arrived at empty stations. Nobody was rebelling. That was the genius of it. Rebellion could be detected, punished, crushed. This was not rebellion. This was incompetence, and the Dominion could not execute 46 species for being bad at their jobs. The conquered peoples could not fight. They had no weapons, no fleets, no armies, but they had hands on every lever, every switch, every loading dock in the Empire. And for the first time in centuries, they were choosing, quietly, carefully, with the blank faces of servants who had perfected the art of looking stupid, to let the machine grind slower. They were watching Earth, all of them. Taeho proposed the plan that would end the war. He stood in front of the UEDC Council at 3 in the morning. Half the room was running on caffeine and fear. The other half had given up on both and was operating on something rawer. Taeho looked like he had not slept in days, which was accurate. The photograph in his chest pocket sat against his heart like a small, flat stone. The plan was not a weapon. It was a broadcast. Using Okar's intelligence on the Dominion's relay infrastructure, Nari's resonance technology modified to carry a signal rather than destroy a drive, and Yuna's total access to the Velthari communication network. Earth would send a single message, one transmission. On every Velthari frequency, every relay, every channel, military and civilian, across the entire Dominion. Not just to the fleet, to every ship, station, colony, and conquered world in their territory. And the message would not be in English, or Korean, or any human language. It would be in 46 languages. Every species the Dominion had conquered. Their words, their tongues, speaking directly to them for the first time since they had been silenced. The message was simple. Tejo put it on the screen. We fought. We are still here. You can be too. The room was quiet for a long time. We cannot beat their fleet, Tejo said, but we can beat their empire. Not with guns, with the one thing they never expected us to have. He paused. An audience. Yuna had 3 days to make it work. The technical problem was monstrous. She had to route a single signal through the Velthari's own relay network, a network she had been sabotaging for months, and ensure it reached every corner of Dominion space at the same time. If the Velthari detected the signal before full propagation, they would cut the relays, and it would be over. One chance, no second attempt. She worked for 71 hours. She slept in her chair for 20-minute intervals that could not honestly be called sleep. Dohan brought her food. She ate without looking up. Nari found a flaw in her frequency modeling on hour 44. Yuna fixed it in 4 minutes. She did not thank Nari. Nari did not expect thanks. They were past that. At hour 71, Yuna looked at Tejo. It is ready, she said. Either this works, or I have just given them the biggest reason to glass us from orbit. Those are the same odds we have had since day one, Tejo said. Almost. Soha recorded the message. 46 languages, 46 species. She sat in her translation booth, the same booth where she had spent the war, listening to the enemy's letters home, and she spoke. Not through a translator, not through a machine. Her voice, their words. Some of the languages had sounds that human vocal cords were not designed to make. Clicking consonants that required parts of the throat humans did not normally use. Tonal shifts that sat outside the range of comfortable speech. Harmonic layers that were meant to be produced by 2 voice boxes, not 1. She made them anyway. It took 11 hours, 46 recordings, 46 times she said the same thing in a different tongue, and each time she meant it in a way that went deeper than translation. She was not converting words from one language to another. She was carrying something across a gap that no dictionary could bridge. The specific, irrational, human insistence that being conquered was not the same as being defeated. When she finished the last recording, she sat in the booth in the silence. The screens glowed blue around her. The headphones sat on the desk. She could hear the hum of the building, and nothing else. She cried, not from sadness, not from exhaustion, from the weight of it. She had spoken for a planet to an audience of billions who had never heard anyone say the things she said. She had spoken to people she would never meet, in languages she had learned from intercepted letters and stolen transmissions and sheer, stupid, human stubbornness. The signal went out at 0600 UTC on a Thursday. It hit every relay in the Velthari network simultaneously. Yuna's routing was flawless. The signal propagated faster than the Dominion's security systems could identify it, jumping from relay to relay across 3 spiral arms in a cascading wave that covered the entire empire in 11 minutes. 46 languages, 1 message. Every Velthari ship, station, colony, and conquered world heard it at the same time. The effect was not immediate. It was a ripple, then a wave. Within hours, Dominion communication channels lit up with traffic the Velthari could not suppress fast enough. The conquered species were not rebelling. Not yet. But they were talking. To each other. Across borders and sectors and light years of enforced silence, they were talking for the first time in centuries. Relvan saw the communication traffic reports and understood. The war for Earth had become a war for everything. He could glass the planet. He could turn the surface to slag and declare victory. And it would not matter. Because the message was already out. The words were already spoken. 46 species had already heard a voice that said, "You do not have to stay conquered, and you cannot unhear a thing like that." He opened a direct channel to Earth, the first formal communication between Velthari Command and Hunan leadership. Tejo answered. The conversation was short. "You have made this war unwinnable," Relvan said. "It was unwinnable the day you sent the order," Tejo said. "My species has ruled for 3,000 years. Mine has survived for 300,000. We are patient." Relvan was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice carried something Tejo had never heard in a Velthari transmission before. It took him a moment to identify it. Respect. "I am withdrawing my fleet," Relvan said, "not because you defeated it, because you made it irrelevant." The channel closed. The fleet withdrew. Cities burned. Millions dead. Ecosystems scarred in ways that would take generations to heal. There was no celebration. No parade. No victory speech. There was a species sitting in the rubble, breathing, alive and quiet with the knowledge of what it had cost and what it had become. The galactic community formally reclassified humanity in their registry. The new designation was not a number. It was a warning. Aukar was arrested by Dominion Internal Security 3 days after the withdrawal. Treason, espionage, collaboration with an enemy species. The charges were long. The trial would be short. Before they took his terminal, he sent one final message through the back channel he and Yuna had built together. A single line in the Velthari language. Yuna received it. She could not read it. She sent it to Soha. Soha looked at the words on her screen for a long time. Her lips moved once, silently, reading them in the original. Then she was still. "What does it say?" Yuna asked. "It says, the footnote was right." Soha sat in the translation booth. The same chair, the same blue screens, the same hum. The war was over. The silence was different now. Not the silence of waiting, but the silence of after. The kind that fills a room when something enormous has passed through it and left. She opened a blank document. A letter to her brother. She had written dozens of them during the war. Never sent, never finished. She placed her hands on the keyboard. She got 3 words in. The door opened. Dohan stood in the doorway, dust in his hair, a bruise on his jaw that was a week old and turning yellow. He was grinning the way he always grinned. Wide, stupid, and completely inappropriate for a man who had spent the last 2 months collapsing mountains on people. "Hey," he said, "your brother is on line 4. Soha stared at him. She reached for the phone on the console. Her fingers were shaking. The rest of her was not.